Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. Thanks again, guys, so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Talking Bitcoin again on another Sunday afternoon with some of the best and greatest Bitcoin OGs in the business, guys. Before we get into the introductions, let's go ahead and just go through your Quickbit section. We got the Mayor multiple going at 0.90, so that's definitely still signaling a buy. I actually ended up, guys, winning the Magical Crypto contest. You might want to check that out. The great Magical Crypto podcast out there with a pretty funny joke about Peter Woolley. Highly suggest everybody check that out. It's pretty funny stuff. We got Blockstream over here tweeting the 7 different laps over 7 days. Really cool stuff, tweeting a lot of stuff about Lightning applications and really bleeding edge stuff, guys. Got to check that out. Of course, all the links are right here in the show notes, always for you guys to check that out. And then finally, we have some Bitcoin donations that are helping some earthquake survivors. So I thought that was really cool. You guys check that out. Bitcoin Magazine did a really great article on it. So you can see that on how Bitcoin is really helping people right on the ground level before any other type of donations can ever reach the people on the ground. So check that out. And finally, we are going to have a meetup, guys. The World Crypto Network meetup in Denver on April 25th. There's going to be a bunch of us there. It's going to be Jack Mallers, the creator of the Zap wallet. It's going to be myself. A bunch of people are going to be there from the World Crypto Network and others as well. So we really hope you guys can come out and say hello, join us, shake our hand. We're going to have a 3-hour Q&A session, basically. So I hope you guys can come out there and check it out. So it should be a good time. Without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce our amazing OG panelists, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, let's go with Mr. Dan Robinson from Chain. Dan, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on again, Vortex.
Awesome, man. Yep, glad to have you back on. Thank you for joining us. And of course, we got Mr. John Bcash Carvello. John, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing? Thanks for having me back.
Awesome, man. We of course love your Roger Ver interview. Glad to have you back in the space and back on in front of a microphone talking Bitcoin again. We all missed you. So let's hear from Francis. Francis, how you doing?
I'm doing super great. Thanks so much for having me again.
Yes, Francis from Cadillacsy.com, guys. Doing some awesome stuff over there with Bitcoin. And finally, Mr. Will Pangman, old school Bitcoiner and podcaster from the World Crypto Network back in the day. Will, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Awesome, man. Yeah, glad to have you back again, Will. So let's get right into it, guys. It's been an interesting week. Bit of a slow news week, but a lot of interesting things are kind of going on. And I really wanted to get into a couple of different conversations on here. Some of the news stories this week inspired some ideas that I want to talk about. So the first one, of course, though, this is kind of an interesting topic, and I don't want to make it too much about an I told you so kind of topic or podcast, but I do want to get into a little bit about maybe talking about, the virtue of patience and things like that, where we have this first news story where there are actually now more Segwit transactions on the Bitcoin network than there are Bitcoin Cash transactions. And so I wanted to kind of get a feel from the panelists and see how they feel about this, see how they think. And so we'll go with you, Will. We'll go with Will first here. Will, let me ask you, first of all, what do you think about this? The Segwit transactions actually overtaking Bitcoin Cash transactions, and then maybe you can speak about what do you think about the patience maybe that it takes to build these networks, because of course these huge decentralized networks take so long to build. Maybe your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, sure. So, I think you hit the nail right on the head there with, the patience aspect. A lot of the people involved in developing Bitcoin's core protocol were involved with the early days of the internet, and they're very, I know this from conversations with them, they're quoted in articles ad nauseum about this, but they are very upset with themselves over having basically stewarded and overseen a privacy broken internet in the early days. So they don't want to make those same mistakes twice, and they know that one of the core values they need to have is somewhat of a conservative approach to this. There's $100 billion+ bounty on $1 billion. That's still a couple $1 billion. It's still massive. So yeah, you need to have a great deal of patience and care in developing these things. I mean, the blockchain core developers have talked a lot about how developing a blockchain core protocol is like repairing a 747 in mid-flight, and it's true. So that's why we have a lot of alternative chains to experiment on, which I think is a relative, a good thing. And also we have testnet for Bitcoin as well. So these are important things. Yeah, Segwit transactions overtaking Bitcoin Cash. I mean, that may be temporary, who knows with the ebbs and flows of all this, but it's certainly interesting to note. It's also interesting, to note how after kind of sluggish approach to adopting Segwit by some of the biggest, transaction volume contributors to the blockchain, how they were slow to kind of integrate Segwit initially, but now it seems there's a rush for it. So because we're seeing the benefits from it. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think patience is move fast and break things is a good value to have in technology in many respects. Disruptive kind of core ethos, that's very cypherpunk in many ways as well. But in terms of Bitcoin, the king, and all of this, it needs to be done with great care, lest we turn into the situations we have right now with all of the the potential for data thievery and spying and data leaks everywhere, and just it's a total mess. So as we're seeing with Facebook and all of that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, it's good points there, Will. I mean, the move fast and break things is all fun and good until like people lose billions of dollars, right? I mean, it seems like it doesn't have much of a place when it comes to a store of value. Now, in other types of interesting startup projects, of course, that might be the case, that it's better and in fact a competitive advantage. But it does seem that like what we're seeing is we are seeing very large sums of money being lost or frozen on the Ethereum chain due to some pretty simplistic programming mistakes. So let's go to John. Let me ask you this, John. Andreas said, likes to say a lot that it takes an incredible amount of complexity to bring the most easiest experiences for the end user, right? When it comes to these distributed and decentralized networks. So let me ask you, John, like, is it good now that we have these two sides, a left and a right, maybe you could call it? Is this good now that we can actually see both Lightning and Bitcoin Cash play out on this in the marketplace, or is it just kind of are they just kind of doomed to fail now that Segwit transactions have overtaken Bitcoin Cash?
I think it's both, I guess, because I guess there's some value to actually seeing what programmers and other experienced people think will happen if you do a certain thing. Like if they say if you make the blocks too big, it will centralize too quickly, or it will have this or that weakness. And so it's nice to have an example to see somebody doing it, and we presume fail, or at least fail to beat Bitcoin. And I do think that like we were talking about how there's more Segwit transactions. I think that we're seeing a lot more people use Segwit. I think making Segwit a default in Bitcoin Core wallet was important for that, getting the big exchanges to start adopting Segwit and using that. And so now we're seeing more and more people using Segwit just by default. But I'm hesitant to use this as a metric to say that Bitcoin is succeeding over Bitcoin Cash, because they have those big blocks, and they have supposedly a very centralized mining aspect to their network, which means they'll find ways to spam the shit out of that network and make it look like they have more transactions if they really want to. So I'm hesitant to make that the battleground, And it will be harder to tell when we have Lightning really going what kind of transaction volume we're really doing. So it's it'll be hard to fight on that metric.
That is some good points, John. I mean, the Bitcoin Cash network is so centralized that such that they can do anything they want. I mean, they own the miners. They had an exchange via BTC, I believe, at one point as well. I mean, they the mining pool as well. So it seems like they can, if they want to fake something, they really can, really easily, and have the resources and means to do so. So, what do you? Let me ask you this quick off top question, John. What do you think would be something that they could easily fake besides transaction volume that we might be able to see in the future?
I don't know how easily it is to fake, but they've obviously paid and faked having node count before, so they could fake that. They could fake fiat exchange value. Roger has always been a fan of getting merchants to adopt Bitcoin and using Bitcoin as commerce for cash and making it zero transaction, all these things. If they allow this narrative of zero transactions, maybe they'll start counting unconfirmed transactions as real. And who knows what these guys are willing to say? They're willing to boldface lie. So your imagination is the only limit.
I guess that's so at this point. Yeah, I mean, we have seen, the Bitcoin Unlimited and XT, we have seen them, and even Bitcoin Cash, pump their nodes. So what that means is we've seen Amazon services, basically nodes spun up on Amazon services where they had like hundreds of nodes spin up overnight. And we can tell that that's not actual organic growth. So, for the most part, we can tell when things are faked, but of course, that's only us, right? He can still pump, or somebody could still, with an agenda, pump a narrative.
You can especially tell when the nodes go offline, and there's just this big drop. It's like, okay, all these nodes went off at the same time.
Yep. Production ready, right, guys? Production ready, as Roger Famous said, Bitcoin Unlimited was. Let's go with Dan then. Dan, so first, let me ask you, what are your thoughts on the conversation so far? And of course, what do you think about Segwit taking over the transactions? And then, with Craig Wright, Fake Satoshi's conference this week, Satoshi's Vision conference, he had a bit of a crazy intro. And I think we can all kind of make fun of that. We've seen this across the Twitter sphere and things like that. So maybe you can also comment on what do you think this means? Why is there such a contrast between Bitcoin Cash and how they present, right, Craig Wright, and then how the regular standard Bitcoin conferences are all about code and all about cypherpunk mentality? What is this contrast that we're seeing? Is this really like a left and a right type of thing, or what is your opinions on this?
Sure, absolutely. And I think the point that John made about transaction count not being necessarily the metric that we want to compete on or the metric that we want to maximize, I think is a really good point. So Segwit gives us some advantage in scaling on-chain transactions. It effectively, quadruples or doubles the block weight that's allowed, and the number of transactions. But the real benefits of scaling that come with Segwit are what it allows you to do in payment channels and Lightning Network. And I think in the long run, to say what we really want is as many transactions as possible happening on-chain in this measurable, sort of not very good for privacy way, I think is very much sort of a Bitcoin Cash value, that they're the ones who think like we want all this on chain. The more transactions are happening in the open here on chain, like the better our platform is. When really, I think the long-term future for Bitcoin, and this is one that really was, I think, part of Satoshi's vision, because he was effectively invented payment channels, is to have most transactions happen off chain. And to have what's going on chain sort of be as small as possible, so it's as easy as possible to run a node, so it's as cheap as possible to do transactions, and to validate nodes. So I think it's certainly a good sign that Segwit usage, as seen is increasing. I think it sort of was natural that Bitcoin Cash doing, as usual, sort of the dumbest possible thing of just saying like, we're just gonna raise the block size. Most of the software, transaction software, doesn't really need to be changed that much to adopt it. Segwit, somewhat more of a serious technological upgrade for adoption, was always going to be sort of a more gradual process. But yeah, in the long run, I mean, it's something that I think, I certainly think most transactions on the Bitcoin, on the main chain should be using Segwit now, and hopefully you'll start to see more of that. And I think it is really good to see that adoption. But yeah, really the ultimate benefit of it is going to come when we see more happening in Lightning, and way more transactions happening off chain. And eventually, we'll have to sort of guess at what the actual usage is, which would be fantastic, because that's much better for privacy. It's much better for scalability. And I think ultimately, these vanity metrics hopefully won't be as important in the future, because they don't measure really what we're looking for. As for sort of the different cultures, I think that was sort of a funny thing to see, with Craig Wright, and it's certainly the kind of thing you would never see Satoshi Nakamoto do. I mean, we don't need any more evidence that Craig is not Satoshi, from just like everything about the way that he behaves and comports himself. But I think that was pretty clear, and the fact that community has kind of credulously, I think without even believing him. That's the thing. It's like, for the most part, I don't think they believe him. They're just okay with him being this publicity-seeking scammer if he's their publicity-seeking scammer. So, I think that about sums up a lot of how I feel about some of the members of the Bitcoin Cash community. Yep.
So it appears that, Dan, we don't think that Satoshi should enter a room with a slow clap.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, it is obviously ridiculous and kind of strange. And the point is that I think that what Bitcoin Cash has shown is that what we've always known, right? Which is that anybody is free to fork off at any time. If you don't agree with consensus, right, then feel free to start a BIP, start a proposal, get a community, around that, and see if you can actually affect some change, right? That's how you gain consensus in Bitcoin. Is you actually have to gain consensus. You have to get everybody in the community on board. So very interesting stuff. Let's go with Francis next. Francis, let me ask you. And well, first, let's just really quick for that. Let me just say that Dan, you did say on-chain and off-chain a bunch of times with Lightning, but let's just clarify a little bit that I guess, Lightning is still on-chain technically, right? Because, you have to open up and close a channel on-chain, because that does get confusing for a lot of people, because they think, that Lightning, they're going to take all the transactions from miners. It's not Bitcoin because it's off-chain, right? But in reality, of course, the Lightning channels require a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, both to open and close a channel. And I believe that, because Lightning is so versatile and so fast and what we need, that Lightning really can allow exponential amount of transactions on the Bitcoin network, which of course will be good for miners. But I just wanted to make sure that we clear that up a little bit, because there's so much confusion with that kind of stuff, and it's so easy to spread FUD. But so let's go with Francis here. Francis, let me ask you, what is your comments on the topic so far, and what does this mean for Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash now that Segwit has actually surpassed in transactions? I mean, do we not need, Francis, every single coffee on the chain? Do we not need to log every single fish, every single container, every single thing on the chain? What do you think, Francis?
Well, I don't know if we should, but I know that anybody can. If they value it more than others, which is really what matters. I was gonna say the same comments as John on the metric. Technically, I mean, I read that EOS does 1 million transactions per second. So obviously, it doesn't really matter. I think competing on the transaction counts doesn't really matter. And thinking about what should be on the blockchain and the on-chain versus off-chain kind of conversation that you were having, in some respects, the blockchain is a really kind of inconvenient necessity for Bitcoin to function. And if we could have the same amount of trustlessness and decentralization and censorship resistant without this really kind of heavy decentralized inefficient mechanism, which requires a lot of coordination, I'm sure we would. So the fact that a lot of the mentality of the ecosystem, I think, has been evolving towards doing a lot of cool stuff client side, anchoring into the Bitcoin blockchain, but doing stuff elsewhere. This feeds into a lot of things like second layer protocol and side chains and client side validation. Bitcoin Cash has taken a completely different approach. So we were saying, like, what can they fake? They can fake a lot more things than what we talked about previously. They can fake an ecosystem, right? If you look at kind of like all of the apps, if you look like at a conference or a page that will list all the participants in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem, 50% of it is just going to be wallets that allow you to now receive Bitcoin Cash, that are just Bitcoin wallets that just got an integration. A lot of it will just be, the rest of the startups will just all come back to the same source of funding, which is going to be Bitmain. You're going to see like Ryan Charles's thing. You're going to see some apps that got some Bitmain funding. You're going to see BitPay, which got Bitmain funding. So they can fake kind of an ecosystem, which is what they need to do in order to counterfeit Bitcoin, because they understand that in order to counterfeit Bitcoin, which is what they're trying to do, they need to counterfeit every single kind of network effect and make them look like they're real, which is what makes Bitcoin work. So this is how you have like these fake decentralized, development groups, which ultimately all kind of follow the same decision, right? So they're just kind of branding every little. If anything is brandable, they'll just kind of brand it and put it out there. Like the other day, they had like this new innovation, which was that they can send Bitcoins by SMS, which is something that we've been able to do in Bitcoin since the beginning. So they can fake innovation. They can fake a lot of stuff. So regarding Segwit, so we should compare to like Bcash, but I think that 30%, that metric is cool. Like that, the comparative to Bcash doesn't interest me or anything else, but that absolute 30% metric is really interesting, because we put a lot of effort into getting Segwit passed, and I think the "I told you so" moment, we can kind of say it, because at some degree, for a year and a half, everything got analyzed, and I think what we foresaw happening was convincing and compelling, and we made a good job of vulgarizing to the public what was Segwit, what was going to happen, how does it work, how does Bitcoin Core development work. So the "I told you so" is gratifying, I have to say. And I still believe that the single most useful thing and most profitable thing for myself that I've ever done was spend all that time advocating for Segwit. So, back in 2016, I think John will remember kind of those days, hanging out in the Bitcoin Core Slack and trying to just go to all the conferences and talking to the actual investors and people about Segwit, and wearing that UASF hat and doing all that work. That took a lot of energy out of a lot of people. And, do people remember that as soon as when Segwit passed, the price of Bitcoin, what was it, Vortex, like $1,000? Something
Around,
like that. So
between 1,000 and 2,000. Yep.
So what's the difference between Bitcoin after 10 grand and Bitcoin before 10 grand? Like, the main difference is Segwit passing, right? And that stuff happening. So as far as I'm concerned, like, that's when Segwit passed, I told some wealthy investors, and I never give financial advice, but I told some people, like, the biggest obstacle to Bitcoin's coming into maturity and of age with the second layer protocols and becoming what it was meant to be, the decentralized censorship layer on which other stuff is built, and which this one huge massive proof of work censorship resistant institution, which can only be really truly useful if there's second layer networks that are using it somehow, because the way that it's being used now isn't super scalable. So I do credit Segwit for the investors turning around. I know we talked about this before, Vortex, like an RBC report that there was like a 50-page report on the fundamentals of Bitcoin, which was super bullish, and it was super bullish because of layer 2, and there was 3 pages on the Lightning Network explaining to investors exactly how it works, what it's going to do, and that it's now in Bitcoin, and that's a huge plus that Bitcoin Cash doesn't have. And just a quick more comments, like some of the things that are coming into Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash is having a huge kind of debate right now to add colored coins into Bitcoin Cash, which is something that was abandoned essentially on Bitcoin because it doesn't work, right, after all this time. Because even the people that were working on colored coins, which was essentially just really cramming a lot of metadata in Bitcoin transactions and kind of trying to this was before ERC20 tokens, of course. They're just trying to replicate that, whilst in the Bitcoin community, the technologies for doing assets are like 1,000,000 times better if you use stuff like confidential assets or client-side proof of publications and that kind of stuff. The stuff that's incredibly more scalable, like color coins on chain, really doesn't scale. So that's another thing that I see.
I believe Jimmy Song worked on color coins and left the project for similar reasons of what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah. So just to end that off, I mean, I'm super happy about Segwit. I think that's a big measure. I think that we can see how fast Lightning is going to get bootstrapped after seeing how fast Segwit gets bootstrapped, because you need to update a lot of stuff kind of in your backend when you updated Segwit, and we saw a lot of companies be very proactive in kind of racing to integrate Segwit. Some of them missed the boat. So maybe on the Lightning side, we're going to see the companies maybe be even more proactive. I think Coinbase recently announced that they were working on Lightning as well. They had a developer working on Lightning, or they had a post like recruiting people for that. So I think Lightning is going to get bootstrapped a little bit the same way that Segwit did, with a little bit slow at start, like is the case right now. But as John pointed out, we needed to have some infrastructure built, like the integration in Bitcoin Core, which we didn't have on Segwit. As these things come in Lightning, these kind of missing infrastructure pieces is going to go like leaps of adoption, kind of like Segwit did.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some people like Andreas out there that said that Coinbase may not adopt Lightning and other exchanges may not adopt Lightning because Lightning is encrypted by default and they have to apply to KYC stuff. But it's like, look, I mean, anybody ever heard of HTTPS? I mean, the entire internet is at this point, for the most part, encrypted. Of course, that encryption can be broken if you are at the server level, right? At the ISP level, with which the NSA and other three-letter agencies have done, which we'll talk about in a bit. But for the most part, HTTPS and Lightning, there's no difference in terms of encryption. There should be no problem. In terms of encryption and regulation, there should be no problem for something like Coinbase or other exchanges to eventually start adopting Lightning, because Lightning is the layer that everybody will connect. Lightning is HTTP for blockchain. It really will allow for all of these chains to interop, to communicate, to use the benefits of each, and just create this new huge network of cryptocurrencies, this internet of money. And I think that is what's coming down the line. It's there's some interesting points you guys made. I mean, faking an ecosystem. I mean, holy smokes, like, that's exactly kind of, I think, what Bitcoin Cash is doing at this point, especially with trying to say that they have all these apps. And now they're making, I believe Bitcoin.com is making their wallet be default to BCH. So now noobs are really going to get wrecked if they weren't already getting wrecked before. It's just interesting. But I guess now, the market, like you say, Francis, I think the market is now digesting, like, the whole scaling debate from last year. Remember, it only happened like last year. It only ended last year. So the market is still kind of understanding, learning lessons and things like that. And so we will see this play out more. But yeah, I guess, it is probably an I told you so moment, but there's lots of innings left to go, and Bitcoin is not finished yet. There's a whole lot of stuff left to do. And I tell everybody, it is really, really early days. So does anybody have any final comments on this subject before we go to the next topic?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, speaking of Lightning and the job that team has done, that small, scrappy team, I know there's lots of teams working on Lightning development, but Elizabeth Stark and Roast Beef and that whole crew, they closed funding recently, and so did a couple other projects, obviously, like CryptoKitties. And it just seems like the amount of money raised should be swapped. I'm excited about the toy phase of cryptocurrencies as well. With Rare Pepes and more games coming that are going to be really cool from some really cool developers. But Lightning is such important infrastructure work. It just seems mind-boggling that, and I trust that Elizabeth raised what she thought she needed to raise, right? Like, I trust that. I know that how responsible they are as a team, and she is as an entrepreneur. So I'm not faulting that at all, but it's mind-blowing that we're still seeing kind of, I experienced this at startups in 2014, 15, and 16 in the Bitcoin focused startups scene. It was incredibly difficult to raise venture capital, and the projects that were getting a lot of funding aren't around that much anymore. Of course, BitPay and Coinbase are, but many others are not. So I just think more victory lap on the Lightning Labs funding round being closed is needed, not less. And I saw some people on Twitter saying, oh, this victory lap that Lightning Labs is doing and all their trolls. And that really upset me, considering the sum that they raised and the kind of sums that we've seen raised in the last 12 months in the token crypto ecosystem. So kudos to that team for their huge raise, and just keep going. More teams are needed in Lightning development. And yeah, like you said, Vortex, there are tons of startups, projects out there, Ethereum projects who need to interface with Bitcoin, Ethereum focus that, need to also work with Bitcoin, are starting a little side team or hiring for Lightning development. So we're seeing this all across the board, even at the enterprise level. I'm hearing it at the enterprise level, PwC, Deloitte, and IBM, and so on and so on. So it's very, very exciting.
Very awesome stuff. Yes, definitely props to Elizabeth Stark for that. It was only about, I believe, 2.3 million that she raised, in contrast to the over $12 million that I believe CryptoKitties raised. So yeah, absolutely strange kind of stuff still going on. But very interesting. Francis, I believe you had something, or?
Yeah. So regarding running nodes and the legal aspects of it, I am super skeptical of those claims. I think Andreas's point is that some people will try at any point to try to de-anonymize Bitcoin and attack it, and that's one potential one. But if you're gonna consider that an MSB or an MSB activity, No, it's just I really don't see that happening. It would be like recognizing multi-signature as just full custodial. It's kind of strange. I don't know who's bringing up this issue. I don't think any regulator has raised this issue. I don't think governments have an idea to regulate Bitcoin Lightning Network nodes right now. I think it's just kind of FUD at the moment. And one thing also is that BitPay is still around on paper, technically. I think BitPay had a lot of clients from the early days where a lot of the Bitcoin advocates like myself went around and convinced everyone to accept Bitcoin via BitPay. But if you look at their services now, they're terrible. I could not pay my Namecheap invoice. Literally, I couldn't bypass like the BIP70 payment request that my wallet wasn't reading. I had to do all sorts of crazy stuff. Now the fees are super high. And if you look at, the comment on Coinbase is like they have to integrate Lightning. Like they don't really have a choice. If there's a regulatory issue with Lightning, like Coinbase is going to have to go to the bat and defend Lightning Network because as a business, if they want to operate on top of Bitcoin, they're not going to have a choice. Lightning is the way that Bitcoin is going. And this is for this reason that my company, another company like Bitrefill, I got one of the Bitrefill developers here. They invested a lot of money and resources and time into developing Segwit, Lightning compatibility, doing all that kind of stuff, being the first out there. A lot of companies are doing that. I've been contacted by a lot of companies that just want Lightning Network to go faster. And when we say, well, we can't make that happen, they say, well, how about if we give you money? Like, can you do more wallets and more stuff? Well, yes, of course we can do that. So there's companies that are literally going out there and they're financing Lightning Network projects just because they want it to go faster, because their business, they're paying transaction fees. They know that the low fees that we have right now are temporary. They still have blood in their mouth from being punched in the face in December when the fees were super, super high, and they know how it feels. And so like Lightning is the market is just gonna thin out the people who are not on Lightning Network. So I think a lot of people know it. And if you don't get on Lightning, then your other option is to go on Bitcoin Cash because you're not going to be able to stay on Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I agree with all that. And I just don't think there's really any better analogy than saying that Lightning is HTTP for blockchain. Like it is HTTP for every single freaking chain to be able to connect with each other. And of course, the most important chain you want to connect to with is Bitcoin so that you can have your value saved so that so your business can actually store value, right? So you can actually pay your bills and things like that. Next year, not just tomorrow with fiat. And so yeah, very important stuff. Very great points, Francis, as usual. I think we can move on to the next topic. Before I do that, though, I will have to say one more time that BitPay has turned into an absolute disgrace. Really has. They've been completely purchased by Bitcoin Cash and Roger Ver at this point, and they continue to make these crazy infrastructure investments into BIP70 and these weird, crazy offshoot things that that clearly don't have Lightning in mind. So yeah, I believe that both Coinbase and BitPay are definitely limited in their amount of time that they'll still be with us. I think that they'll be gone. I think they're a part of this first this accumulation stage, this onboarding stage, but they will not be here for later stages. So let's move on to the next topic then. Before I do, please, guys, if you are new, please hit the subscribe button below. If you like what you're seeing, hit the thumbs up. We try to bring you content all the time on World Crypto Network each and every single week. We bring you lots of different content via audio as well. We are syndicating multiple podcasts, and we hope to even syndicate more and more in the future, maybe even including something that John's doing. I hear that John might be doing a new podcast, so maybe we'll get John's stuff on there. That'd be great. So more and more stuff, and even Will is actually doing some awesome podcast work as well. So maybe we'll try to get that as well. So guys, of course, all these guys' Twitter will be in the show notes. So please make sure you follow these people. These are very, very smart people. So let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here. This was an interesting one. I think this is kind of hits home to a lot of Bitcoiners and things like that, because we are very cypherpunk focused, right? Very freedom and very privacy focused. So this next topic is going to be interesting. The Snowden leak. We've seen some recent articles about saying that the Snowden leak suggests that the NSA is extensively tracking Bitcoin users. So we know that the three-letter agencies have every single packet digested through them, every single non-encrypted packet digested through them. But we figured it would be only a matter of time before the three-letter agencies, started paying attention. And of course, they definitely did during Silk Road. But maybe we'll go with Dan first on this. Dan, maybe your thoughts, as a bit of a lawyer, maybe you can give us some of that angle. But basically, I wanted to hear your thoughts. Should Bitcoiners be worried? Like, and has the vast majority of people expecting this? Have they already been expecting this? And will this slow or stop Bitcoin's rise?
Sure. So, I mean, I think having worked a lot on confidentiality technologies, I think generally we've been making the assumption that either the NSA has been doing this kind of thing or more for years, or they were inevitably going to. So I think that's sort of your threat model, and those are your adversaries. And I think learning that it would be malpractice of them not to, considering again their sort of interests and the potential uses that Bitcoin can get up to, for them not to at least be trying to do this. I think what's also notable from the report is that I think this is a sort of underappreciated aspect of privacy, is sort of the network layer of privacy. So apparently they weren't just looking at the blockchain data, which a lot of people don't realize even how much is public on that. But they were also looking at the peer-to-peer network data, and since the NSA has fantastic capabilities to monitor network and record traffic on the internet, people give away a lot just from their usage patterns and or from using these products that apparently the NSA was using as Trojan horses. I'm saying NSA so much on this recorded thing now that certainly we're getting recorded right now by them probably. But I think if anything, this kind of thing speeds up Bitcoin's adoption, because people have started to realize how you need a technology that at least conceivably, I don't think we're there anywhere close to there yet, but at least conceivably can give you financial privacy even from state level actors. And in the long run, I don't know if maybe there'll be sort of some kind of a truce where you can try to prevent things like terrorist financing without giving up control over your money or financial sovereignty or privacy. And I think it would be nice maybe to find a sort of way to do that. But I think right now that's the role that Bitcoin serves, is it's kind of an escape valve for what otherwise is essentially a totalitarian surveillance society, where again not everything is necessarily governed directly, but it's surveilled. And so I think having this just sort of drives home the point that we need to invest better in privacy technology at every layer of the Bitcoin stack, and that Bitcoin I think is pretty important if people want the kind of privacy from the U.S. government that maybe we would say they're entitled to. I'd also note just on the legal side that it's not really in these agencies' mandate to, other than the FBI, to do surveillance of just U.S. citizens. So again, obviously not all you Bitcoin users are U.S. citizens, but there is kind of we've seen a lot of the overreach that the NSA has been doing. And where like they and I'm sure this program inevitably ended up recording transactions that only involved U.S. persons, and that therefore aren't really within the NSA's mandate. So that's another sort of angle, I think.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a conversation about is the NSA spying on us? Like, we already know they are. We already know that every single packet gets digested from the three-letter agencies. But let me ask you this, Dan. I've heard this from a few people where there is legislation being passed that is making the data that the NSA and other three-letter agencies collect harder and harder to use. Have you heard anything about that? Where, like, for example, even at a state level, it seems that there's regulation that is ongoing now that's making it difficult for example, for the data the NSA uses to be used in court, or that they collect to use in court. I'm
not sure I'm familiar with the direct with the whatever development you're referring to there, but I do think there's been a backlash against the ways in which it's branched out from just being counterintelligence or national security or anti-terrorism to sort of like things like drug crimes and money laundering, and sort of things within sort of not really that shouldn't be within their purview. So I do think there have been some criminal justice reform efforts in that area, and maybe that's the one you're referring to. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I see some people in the comments that are like in the chat, they're like, why don't you just leave the US? Let's see. Leave my country where I was born, right? Or try to help fix it. I think we're going to probably try to choose the latter.
And also, like I said, the NSA actually, can totally surveil you. In fact, they're supposed to be only surveilling people who don't live in the US. So it doesn't necessarily free you when we have this, global surveillance system. Leaving the U.S. doesn't necessarily help you. If anything, it makes it worse.
They clearly don't know what the Five Eyes is then, if they think that
right.
leaving the U.S. is going to be okay, right? So yeah, so interesting stuff. I just I don't want to spread FUD or anything, for people, but I do want to educate people, and let them know that, look, if you're a Bitcoiner, well, already you're going to be tracked, right? But if you're a Bitcoiner, then you probably definitely have some extra attention paid to you. And of course, if you're a content creator like myself, well, I'm just assuming that every single thing I say is being logged and and is taken from either my phone or my iPad or something. I am like I do understand that like most people that, for example, the Mark Zuckerberg picture, right, where he had his camera and his microphone taped up. I definitely do that, right? I'm trying not to let them see every single facet of my personal life, right? But I do want to just make people aware that this is happening. So I want to let's ask Francis, maybe like, what are some of the tools that people could, I love your thoughts on this topic as well, Francis, but maybe you can also talk about maybe some of the tools that people can use, to just basic tools that just can try to help make sure that, for example, that the NSA doesn't have every single thing that they watch on the internet, like maybe even a simple VPN or something like that. Francis, what do you think?
Well, first of all, to reassure everyone, there's one thing the NSA can't do is seize your Bitcoins. So, I mean, they can definitely track them, but they can't seize them. There are such things as, plausible deniability, the presumption of innocence, and you can't have civil asset forfeiture on your coins, even if they think, right? So you have to give them up, physically, voluntarily. They can't take it from force. If you're well prepared, if you have your encrypted backups, and if you have your treasures and stuff like that, and certainly if your coins are not on an exchange or on a custodial wallet. So that is one thing you can do, is to have some kind of mentality where you say, okay, is it really true that no one wants to seize my Bitcoins or can seize my Bitcoins? Or a lot of people seem to think that there's no one out there that's trying to get their Bitcoin so they can leave them on exchange or feel safe or something like that. I would just say, if they can track your Bitcoins and see everything, if they could see everything you've done with a Bitcoin ever, would you still feel that way? So definitely try to make them unseizable. So on the downside, Bitcoin is an open book that's really hard. Bitcoin is an open book that's really easy to read. So I haven't read the report, Dan, but you mentioned network monitoring, and this is one level of sophistication over that only states can pretty much do, that the traditional people snooping like your competitors aren't necessarily doing. For example, and the government agencies know what to do to de-anonymize Bitcoin users. I would say that some of the top Bitcoin experts are probably working at the NSA. Nobody knows them. They don't do pull requests or then they're under their real names or something like that. But I'm guessing that some of the
we of course know that the chain analysis companies have been hired by government bodies and such.
Yeah. But like directly within the NSA type of like high level access people, I'm sure have a really good knowledge of Bitcoin. I personally, and also the NSA can do a lot of stuff that other governments can't. Like I've participated at like roundtables with some Canadian agencies, and they knew, for example, a long time ago that they could de-anonymize Electrum users because Electrum will ping like the server with a bunch of address. So basically, like if you monitor someone's traffic, you just see like an IP address sending a bunch of Bitcoin addresses to a server. Bang, that's this guy. You get him like that. I've seen I've seen some like commercial Bitcoin tracking software, and I've tried it out, and they claim that like 3%, I think, of all addresses are linked to some identity. You can't imagine what you can find out by just scraping Bitcoin Talk and Twitter and all sorts of stuff. I was using one of those software, and I found one of the transactions from an entity to another entity that only I knew about. And it was like in that software, and it was like labeled with names. So that was like, whoo, that's pretty intense. So imagine if you can couple that with network monitoring, like illegal wiretapping of people and like upfront interceptions and stuff. Like imagine that database that they have. So that's scary to me. That's really scary to me. I'm not surprised, although I would have liked that they would just not have done that, and it would be under the radar. Potentially, they would not have interest in doing that for some reason. But I'm absolutely not surprised that they're doing it. So the question is, what do we do from now on? Well,
delete your Facebook, I guess. Would be the first.
yeah, definitely be more aware. But as a community, it's just we can only have privacy if we all use it, right? Because we're transacting with a lot of other people, and when we transact with someone else, usually there's a requirement that they're doing something on their end for us to be private. Like participating in a network. So I would just say, if you want privacy, then you need to make sure that everybody else can have it really easily and seamlessly. And at this point, it means working on Bitcoin development and pushing those new technologies out there as soon as we safely and conservatively can.
Yep. And I think awareness, like you said, Francis, is just so important. And that's why I try to bring up, these types of topics on the show so that people just don't let it go to the back of their mind, because that's what happens so many times. People are like, oh, I'll delete my Facebook one day. And then they hear like the story that reminds them of again, oh yeah, I was going to delete that. I'll delete it one day. And they never do. And, this is what's really important is that, because our lives are being increasingly controlled by these algorithms, because our lives are being increasingly put on the internet, they're getting more, these centralized entities like Facebook are gaining more and more control over our lives. And so we have to be very vigilant and be very careful and not let the pendulum swing too far one way, because that's where we're at right now. Right now, I think the pendulum's already as far on the other side, like from privacy as you can get when it comes to companies like Google and Facebook and Apple,
And just to address, like Dan, you said, we're really far away from privacy. I agree, but I think a lot of the step can be bridged with just UX, because there's a lot of privacy enhancing techniques out there that are like not reusing addresses, which is something that a lot still do. I can't believe they still do that. And it's a UX issue. It's an application issue, because if you're like a Bitcoin core developer and you want to stay anonymous, you're going to find ways to stay anonymous and have maximum plausible deniability on everything. These things need to be made available to the general public, and that's not Bitcoin Core protocol changes. These are apps.
Yeah, great point. I mean, there's so much that boils down to UX when it comes to something as simple, as privacy, like something as simple as reusing addresses. I mean, it's just amazing. And I really want to make sure that people are aware of this, that people see this, and that the designers make improvements to their wallets, and they make better wallets, and they make all this stuff kind of built in. We do see wallets like Samurai Wallet that are kind of just really trying to take charge of the privacy aspect. They're really trying to use that as their angle. And I think it's great. Obviously, they're only available for Android right now, but if more and more wallets took this kind of initiative, because their users are demanding it, then we would have this more privacy ecosystem. So like you said, Francis, you really got to demand it. More people got to use it. And so, yeah, that's what we're trying to advocate here. So let's go with John next. John, what are your thoughts on the discussion so far and, Bitcoiners being tracked? We all expected this, right? But at the same time, we have to make sure that this is not like a boogeyman thing. Like this is actually reality. This is actually what's happening. So John, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's really hard to cover your ass on the internet. If you're doing all these digital things, you're using all these network connections, and if the NSA can listen in on, everything you can do from like what device you're using, what chip that device uses, where you sent your Bitcoin transaction, where the node is located that received and propagated your transaction, etc. If they can taint the blockchain with all this external information, they can probably map a lot, so having privacy is going to be very difficult, especially if they're watching you. If they're watching everybody, then that's everybody. But I think that we are going to see privacy improvements. I think that I wonder if when we do have actual anonymity on Bitcoin, how governments will behave and what they'll do differently, and how they'll perceive cryptocurrency at that point. But hopefully it will be okay.
Do you think that, do you think that Lightning can get us there pretty quickly? Because, Lightning is encrypted by default, right? And uses onion routing. So do you think that could be a step in the right direction?
I don't know. I'm honestly not, I'm not technically versed enough to comment on what level of anonymity Lightning is going to bring for us, but I've been told that it's going to definitely improve things. I don't really know how far we'll go with that.
Very interesting. Yeah, because people have been talking about like we mentioned earlier about Andreas saying that maybe exchanges won't accept it, but again, as Francis and Dan said, they just won't really have a choice because this is the next layer. This is the next layer that we need to all communicate on. So
it's going to be hard to blacklist Bitcoin because eventually somebody buys it from somebody and it gets kind of watered down over time. And how can you blame the last guy that bought a dirty Bitcoin when it was like dirty 10 holders ago, you know?
Yep,
and that's kind of like what he was saying about how we all have to do privacy stuff. You know, the more people are mixing these coins naturally and actually transacting coins that somebody might consider to be blacklist worthy, it's going to be really hard to blacklist stuff if everything. It's like you can't outlaw dollar bills for having cocaine on them because they all have it. You know,
it's so true, man. It's so true. Yeah, for you youngins who haven't read that article yet, because this is actually kind of technically old news, right? I think this article came out like many years ago, so you guys need to check that out because that's kind of hilarious, but that's actually truth. Let's go with Will. Will, what are your thoughts on this so far? Are you scared of the NSA tracking you? Do you feel that we can kind of overcome this if more and more people pay attention to privacy? And will Lightning help us with privacy?
So yeah, this is something we've known about, is that everybody's on the panel has said so far. It's been a capability as long as X key score was disclosed by Snowden, and of course a lot of Snowden disclosures that were published by the newspaper were like old news also, you know, or maybe like heavily conspiracy theorized, but Snowden revelations confirmed it. But a lot of folks had been whistleblowing them and it kind of confirmed them, and the whispers were kind of in the open, so to speak, on a lot of what was published by WAPO and, you know, Glenn Greenwald and as they sifted through all of the disclosures. So yeah, I mean, of course this is cause for concern. In my opinion, the biggest threat to Bitcoin for years hasn't been scaling. It's been fungibility and / privacy. You know, so again, another core infrastructure, you know, base layer of the stack sort of problem. Which is, you know, and I do agree with Francis, like as someone who worked very closely with security user experience for the past 5 years, and especially at Airbits when I was there for 2 years. So, you know, Airbits always had features in place to improve, to take user address hygiene, like Bitcoin address hygiene to the max. So that's always been in there for Airbits and now Edge. Their new app as well. So I think, you know, that's always good, but even that, you know, especially it's on your phone too. So if you're known on your phone, you know, some of this other metadata can be found out. Of course, with Airbits, you know, all that stuff's encrypted, you know, before it ever leaves the phone. But, you know, the capabilities go far, far beyond just what we read in the news. I mean, air-gapped machines aren't even safe anymore from some of the things I read. And the good news is, you know, I've worked on user experience and product and you know, at Airbits, and so I know how to kind of think about this.
Will, we might have lost
hard to sell.
Oh, we lost you for a second. Sorry, keep going, Will.
Oh yeah, back in, you know, the Airbits days, you know, when I was, you know, 2014, 15, 16, it was very hard to sell privacy tech. Very hard to drum up demand for privacy if you're in the marketing of security and privacy applications. And nowadays, people are kind of realizing this. A lot of things are driving this, especially cryptocurrency adoption. But a lot of things are driving this: the Snowden disclosures, and of course, you know, tech leaks, and the activism, the social activism around social media that's going on right now. I mean, it's 10 years too late, but it's good to see finally. So the good news is this stuff has demand now. Like security UX has actual demand in the marketplace nowadays, thanks to cryptocurrency in large part. The other good piece of news is that people are banging so hard on all of these security features and trying to find vulnerabilities. There's so many more, you know, bug sniffers out there. So we're finding these things, and it's getting more fashionable, I would say, to kind of leak this stuff and kind of put egg on the face of these data abusers. So these these are all really good developments. I'm not really a big fan of public shaming, but at a certain point, short of any violence, maybe that's all you're left with. And some of these corporations, they deserve shame to a great deal. So yeah, this is worrisome, but more worrisome for me anyway is how much we're thinking about how much we're going to be able to implement the privacy fixes and security fixes upgrades on like base layers of the protocol that require consensus and things like that. How easily will these be able to be added with the sophistication growing of social attacks against Bitcoin in the future? I don't see Bcash or any of these existing social attacks we've seen being the last of it, right? The final boss is yet to come. So these are things that are real concerns. So if you're an app developer out there, if you're a core protocol developer out there, please be working on these kinds of problems.
Absolutely. Very well said, Will. And remember, guys, look, we've always known that Bitcoin will one day have to go up against government attacks. We always knew that was coming. It was always going to be the end boss, so I think that now we're really starting to get close to that, especially with crazy stuff like you mentioned, Will. I literally saw a YouTube video about something the other day where air-gapped machines aren't even safe anymore. They literally, like, I don't know, man, use the CD-ROM drive with like electromagnetic. It was crazy. You don't even need.
There's some crazy stuff. You was talking about Zuckerberg covering up his headphone jack on his laptop. I mean, there's so many crazy sonic attacks you can do that people can tell what key is being typed on the keyboard based on just the fingers touching. It is insane. And
it's not slowing down, right? This is also not slowing down. So this, again, is what makes Bitcoin even more important, because we really got to move into this era of trusted hardware. We have to usher in an era of trusted hardware where we can track how the hardware and software and firmware, but specifically hardware and firmware are created, versioned and all that kind of stuff. Somehow track that with Bitcoin, because that's going to be the only solution, something akin to that, because we can no longer trust things like Intel. We can no longer trust things like these large corporations, because they will just continuously get infiltrated by the three-letter agencies, right? By bad actors. So at this point, we need Bitcoin more than ever, and we need people out there like you that are listening, maybe to build this software, to build this hardware, to usher in this new era of trusted hardware, because the old ways now are broken, and they are proven to be broken. And we see these leaks now of Intel chips being just completely freaking owned from the start, from before you even buy it. So interesting stuff, guys. Really appreciate your feedback on this topic. I think we can go ahead and move to our final topic, unless anybody else has anything.
I have a quick comment.
Please.
I'm a little bit anxious about suggesting that trusted hardware is the path forward. This is something that actually Eamon Goon Sire was talking about when he was promoting his Bitcoin NG thing at the Satoshi's Vision Conference. He's trying to say that if you trust the chip, if you trust the hardware and use the trusted element, that this now enables you to not have to do on-chain serialization of transactions, that you can have malleability still. And so when I see somebody like him promoting trusted hardware as a path forward, it makes me, a little more scared of that kind of future, because we already have limited ability to audit, say, the code as a regular person, to audit, say, the code of Bitcoin. And now you're expecting us to also have trust in the hardware. I would think maybe it'd be better path forward to just assume you can never trust the hardware you're using, and develop new ways to ensure that you can still achieve randomization that doesn't compromise you just by if somebody knows the chip you used.
So you think we can defeat this at the software level then? Even maybe despite,
or maybe do some kind of hybrid where, in order to create Bitcoin wallet keys, you have to use 2 devices, or have some way that it makes it a lot exponentially harder for them to just, if they know where you are or what computer you were using, that they can't just like steal your whole wallet.
Absolutely. Well, education is always where everything starts, guys. So please, spread the word. We need this kind of stuff in Bitcoin more than anything else, because again, Bitcoin is going to be one of the few things that allows us to even have privacy in the future, if there is such a thing, if we can actually end up preserving that. So very great, guys. Let's go ahead and move on to the final topic. We're already kind of over an hour, so we'll just maybe make this one a little bit brief, but this is an interesting topic, because looks like the Halong miners have begun shipping to people, right? So this is another FUD, the Bitcoin Cash and other coins like to say, right, that Lightning is always 18 months away. It's always vaporware, right? But of course, we have that now on mainnet. Halong is never going to ship, and now they've started shipping to users. And of course, my favorite is that my favorite FUD of all time still, I think, is that Segwit addresses can be stolen from. That's one of my favorite. But of course, we have proven that to be 100% FUD and fallacy. So let's go ahead and ask the first person. Let's go with John first on this one. John, what is your because we're going to get to Francis. Francis is what we want to know, because I think Francis might have one. So we'll get to him. We'll get to him next. But first, John, what are your thoughts on Halong actually shipping? I don't believe you ordered a miner, but I mean, maybe you've heard of people receiving these miners, because I've certainly heard of and seen people receiving these miners. What are your thoughts on Halong supposedly kind of zapping a few percentage points away from Bitmain and their monopoly? And do you think that this is the right approach to combat Halong mining, to combat Bitmain and these monopolies, is by starting more and more of these companies like Halong, or should we just change the proof of work?
I don't think it's an approach at all. I think it's just naturally the market evolving. I think as Bitcoin becomes more valuable and more desirable to mine, you're going to see competition arise. And when you have, only one entity controlling most of any market, they start to have inefficiencies that allow competitors to creep in. So I think that's all we're seeing, is we're seeing finally somebody else having enough money. Somebody held Bitcoin long enough to be able to create their own miners and be a competitor. I don't know that this really removes centralization issues to do with relying on China so much just for the hardware itself. But it is nice to see a separate company involved. It's nice to see the kind of Bitmain known mining pools declining a little bit in percentage. So that's all good to see. I think that we saw that mining centralization is only so much of a problem. We only need to be decentralized enough, and I think that to see it improving anyway. And we survived. We did the UASF fork. We were able to get a change that the miners were trying to block. We were able to make it happen. So it's not like they controlled us, but it is nice to see that the power is being dispersed a little bit better.
Yep, agree. I mean, sure, Bitmain has this big monopoly, but hey, we proved last year with UASF that the users actually are in charge. We proved that the miners work for the network. We don't work for the miners. And so that's really important, because there is some people out there that are throwing some FUD that that mining centralization, it could take down Bitcoin. Well, of course, we understand that that's not the case. Mining is actually becoming more and more decentralized. Quickly, let me just ask you that, John. Like, what is your response to somebody saying that Bitcoin mining is centralized and it's getting more centralized? What is your?
It's nonsense. I mean, I don't mine myself. I have mined in the past, but I do know some people with some pretty decent sized operations, and I know people that are just scaling up big in Canada. I know that there's some mining moving over to the west coast of the US. You're hearing more and more about larger mines opening in places outside of China, and you're even seeing Chinese mining start to migrate away from China. So I think that I can tell you firsthand that I know a miner. He's opening, like, I don't know, he has several different mines, and he's using Dragonmint miners, and he's trying to make switches. So there's actual real people, real miners out there actively voting to use hardware that is not coming from Bitmain and trying to help spread this power.
Yeah, that's awesome, because we've heard from many companies and many people around the world that if they could order something other than an S9, right? If they could have some competition in there, they would absolutely go with that, hands down, right away. If nothing else, just to try it out as for your business, right? Just for good business research. So yeah, we have seen that there is a demand. And again, we've talked about this before, but Bitmain's profits don't exist in a vacuum. If other people are seeing them become insanely profitable, which we have seen, they've made $1 billion last year, right? In profits, then more companies should want to join in there, because competition is always good, and the world understands this, in general. So I feel like if Halong and other miners come in, then more and more companies will actually end up choosing them by default, just to choose something other than Bitmain. So very good points, John. Let's go ahead and go with Dan next. Dan, what are your thoughts on Dragonmint coming in the space? I mean, do we have a shot now at kind of competing with Bitmain's monopoly? And do you see more and more miners coming into the space anytime soon?
Yeah, so I mean, I think hopefully the long run situation is not, is that miners end up not being that profitable, because I think it's not necessarily that good for the space, and it's not really, it doesn't really make sense as sort of a sustainable future for mining to be a really profitable thing. You want it ultimately to be commoditized. You want everyone, certainly you want everyone to be able to use the latest technology without being encumbered by patents, as we had Slush on when I was on a couple weeks ago, when we were talking about, and that's one of the reasons why I think this was able to happen. But I think it's ultimately like this, the situation with having either one or even sort of just a couple miners is generally not good for the space. But also, I don't particularly think it's sustainable. In business, you don't that often see these kind of monopolies. Nothing sort of less permanent than a monopoly that seems really permanent right now. So I think I think all in sort of the long run, we're absolutely going to see more of this kind of competition and changes in that industry. And I think it's great. I think it's really good for mining.
Awesome. Let's go with Will next. Will, what are your thoughts on this so far? Is Bitmain's monopoly do we finally see it possibly being broken? And have you heard of any other miners besides Halong coming into the space?
So speaking of other miners coming into the space, I know that I always over the years heard about teams trying to develop a new chip or develop an assembly line process, or try to get in after the incumbents right now, over the last few years. It never seemed to materialize. And then we also saw during the same period of time smaller mining fabrication businesses being acquired by Bitmain, right, and others. So yeah, it's great to see Halong mining. For about 5 or 6 months now, I've seen the local meetup groups and like Facebook groups and stuff like that around the Midwest, Chicago, Madison, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Madison, other areas. There's a lot of mining facilities in Wisconsin. The power's relatively cheap, and 3 or 4 of them have opened up for business in the last 3 or 4 months. So they're courting miners, and they're actively courting, Halong's devices. And I'm also seeing people who are anticipating receiving their Halong miners. So I definitely see a shift in the sentiment towards which mining devices may be available and give the best ROI and their most excitement to receive. Excuse me. But yeah, the monopoly is not permanent for sure, and it's great to see a competitor in the space.
Absolutely agreed with that. I'm all for about more competition. Finally, let's go to Francis then. And Francis, first, let me ask you: did you receive your Halong miners?
Unfortunately, I did not.
Oh, no.
I really wish I had. And when I will be very, very happy for many, many reasons. Me starting to mine might be one of the least reasons. So I did talk to the Halong guys via Twitter yesterday or 2 days ago, and they told me my miners were being shipped tomorrow, so on Monday. I did order some miners, and I will tell you when they arrive. And when they arrive, I will definitely make a live unboxing video. So that's going to happen hopefully this week. Actually, I'm just going to also do a promo. Tuesday, we're doing the Quebec Mining Meetup #2. And we're going to have an update on Halong that we're going to be giving during that meetup. Hopefully, our special guests will be able to join us by Skype and also give some pretty good insights regarding the new kind of miners coming out of the market on Tuesday at our meetup. And this is going to be on the World Crypto Network live as well. So at our meetup, there's going to be, I talked about them last week, a company of guys, a few guys of them from Montreal that are doing a miner. So that company is called Orion Miner. They are advertising on their website a 20 terahash per second miner at 7 nanometer and a first generation, I think it's 16 terahash per second. Obviously, I have no idea if it's real or not. I have not seen it. However, I think I may actually, we'll see. Like on Tuesday, we'll see what kind of information they want to share. There are other projects that nobody knows about that I've seen. There's 2 others that are kind of I'm not sure how serious, but that are talking about making chips, making R&D for chips. So people are definitely like going out there and like making chips. There's also some of the earlier Bitcoin companies that are making a comeback with new liquidity, with new opportunities. So some old look at Slush. Slush pool is growing, you know, super fast. Now with Halongs, the Halongs are going to have ASIC boost inside, and you can use ASIC boost on Slush, your Halong ASIC boost on Slush. So I think a lot of the so one thing I can say, like, so Halong hasn't arrived. I cannot confirm that they exist. I've seen only photos, very few photos of deliveries, and they were MyRig deliveries. MyRig is one of the distributors. If you go on the forum, there's been talks about, you know, why the MyRig miners are shipping before others. I don't really know. I'm expecting them this week. So until then, you know, fingers crossed. But what I can say is that a lot of people bought Halongs. Like a lot of Halongs are being shipped out. I know people that had shipments of Halong. I went to a company that bought a lot of Halongs just to try out Bitcoin mining, like a super big company that wanted to try out Bitcoin mining, and they just bought a lot of Halongs. What was interesting is that there was a second market for Halong pre-orders. A very big second market for Halong pre-orders. So people were buying and selling batch one of Halong. I think that's also an interesting observation, is that, you know, when you purchase a miner, like a lot of people like me, like we took a loss on the Halong, like big time. Like if we had bought like S9s, they would have started to mine much earlier, and we would have objectively made more money if we had bought S9s and Halongs. But the way that I think a lot of us saw it was like, so the guys at Halong are Bitcoiners. They're definitely like, you know, pro Bitcoin core kind of mentality, you know, open competition in mining, and they invested like tens of millions in R&D to make this thing happen, or so they claimed. And I was like, everybody in Ethereum is investing in ICOs to make Ethereum better. Like for me, it was like, okay, I'll just invest in this company, and you know, I'll potentially get a huge payoff. But what's interesting is like with a miner, it's almost like all or nothing, right? So if you don't get the miner, then you get nothing. And this has happened in the past with a lot of people. Like if you've been in Bitcoin long enough, like 2013, 2014, like a lot of ASICs were pre-bought and never delivered, or delivered 2.5 years later. A lot of tens of millions of dollars of Bitcoins were stolen from early Bitcoiners that put a lot of faith in a Bitcoin mining company. And you know, if so, they haven't arrived yet, and I'm just gonna say, like, it was a big test of faith for the Halong investors, because if you invested Halong in the first batch, you really needed to trust them, because they had almost no guarantees. It was kind of anonymous. They didn't have really any proof, and it was kind of just going on their word and on their vision. So when they deliver, I'm gonna feel a huge sigh of relief, because I did actually promote Halong quite a lot. Once we know, because there's a big difference between making a chip that's better than Bitmain and delivering, right? And feeding the huge global appetite for Bitcoin. It's a massive difference. Like a lot of people can prototype a good miner, but can you ship, you know, 250,000 units, you know, per quarter? That's the whole thing entirely. Halong is gonna, if this thing, you know, happens to be true, and I get my Halongs this week, and I'll believe it for real, and I'll confirm it. It's going to be a huge game changer for mining. That's for sure. And the rumors are that there's a lot of S9s that are on the market that were overproduced, and a lot of S9s are being sold out there. So if the Halong gets on the market and it is more efficient than the S9, that's going to be quite interesting to see.
Awesome. Yeah, more and more competition.
I just want to say one thing real quick,
please,
Vortex. Yeah, the demand for Halong is probably being pushed as well. In part, I believe Bitmain still only accepts BCH for their miners. So I know a lot of people who go through a hassle to get BCH to pay for those that probably would prefer not to go through that hassle. And
they also accept fiat.
Yeah, they changed it back. You can buy without just using Bitcoin Cash now.
Oh, you can. So is it just Bcash and fiat, or what?
I don't know if it's Bitcoin as well, but I'm pretty sure it's fiat. Yeah, I'd heard several people tell me that they capitulated and accept more than Bitcoin Cash now.
Wow, it's about time. That's interesting stuff.
Pretty sure it's just USD, but I can't confirm. I haven't been on the site recently.
Oh, that's funny. But yeah, it's about time, guys. I mean, come on. Only using BCH. I mean, come on. We people. There's a lot of people in the world. They need to be able to purchase this mining equipment, and they'd like to do it in maybe a currency other than BCH. So it's going to be interesting to see all these mining competitions, how the angles they're going to use, because I guarantee you one of the angles they're going to use is we accept like all currencies, because they'll probably use something like Shapeshift or something, right? So we can accept all currencies, and then hopefully they're smart about it and turning it into Bitcoin. But that's very interesting stuff. So I think we heard from everybody now on this particular topic. So I think we can go ahead and end the show. This was a great topic, guys. I'm really excited to see Halong coming into the space. I'm really excited for them to ship more products. And Francis, man, if you could do an unboxing, that would be great, guys. Everybody needs to follow Francis to check that out. I believe you did an unboxing of the newest Trezor, which was very cool. You actually did a whole walkthrough about it. So that was very awesome, Francis. So you guys definitely got to check that out. That was really cool. And I think we can end it here. So guys, thanks so much for joining. Had a great time. Thanks so much for joining us in the chat. And if you guys haven't, if you guys missed the show, definitely join us in the comments. Of course, we're always there. And we do the show every Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific. So John, let's do the outro. John, where can we find out more about you, sir? Oh, you're muted, sir.
I am Bitcoin Error Log on Twitter, also on YouTube, and my company is exotica.tv. Come give us a visit as long as you're over 18.
Yeah, over 18 only to John's side, guys. But definitely don't care how old you are. Check out his interview. Lots of interviews, but definitely check out the interview with Roger Ver. He of course has done other content, but that's the one that everybody seems to remember, the Bcash one. My personal favorite one, of course, John. So thank you so much for introducing that into the ecosystem. You have immortalized the meme of Roger flipping off the audience. So very, very, very awesome. Can't say enough about that. So Dan, where can we find out more about you, sir?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Dan Robinson, and got to plug again our Bitcoin smart contract language, Ivy. Check it out, ivy-lang.org.
And again, guys, that is smart contracts over Bitcoin. Definitely need to check that out. Dan's software is making it easier and easier to create smart contracts over Bitcoin, and I'm really excited for both that and even the simplicity language that's going to be coming out. Who knows when, right? But it's my guess is probably going to be this year or next year. It really is going to be. This is some Bitcoin 2.0 amazing tech. So check that out, guys. Francis, where can we find out more about you?
All right. So as you said, well, I'm hanging out here every Sunday. So watch next week on Sunday. I'm on Twitter all the time. And as you said, I'm going to try to do more videos, actually, because like I just did I just so happy to see the Trezor, which is the only product other than Halong I've ever recommended. So I did a video and I got like 16,000 views. I thought it was ridiculous. So I guess people like unboxing videos.
That's awesome, man. People love it, especially when you know what you're talking about. Because remember, Francis, that wasn't just an unboxing; that was a whole walkthrough. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, it just kind of evolved into something more than I thought it was going to be. But I also want to announce that, yeah, we're going to have a meetup on Tuesday. It's going to be incredible. We came up with so much information on Bitcoin's electricity consumption and facts and the unseen effects of the Bitcoin mining industry and how it's disrupting HVAC and all sorts of crazy things that people never talk about or see about in mining. This is the part. Our part in the lobbying efforts for here in Quebec to change the government's minds that Bitcoin creates no jobs and shouldn't be welcomed here necessarily. So there's been a lot of politics going back and forth. So we really just got all the facts for everybody to take home, to take to their local politician and friends and say, Bitcoin mining is going to be awesome for the economy. What's good for Quebec obviously is good for everybody in local jurisdiction. So definitely check that out. We're going to be dropping some really awesome facts, especially about electricity consumption. And another quick announcement is that I'm actually going to be launching a French podcast. I'm still going to be doing WCN in English all the time, but I'm going to be launching a French podcast, not necessarily because there wasn't content in French, but I think that our kind of perspective on WCN is there's not that in French. There's just content about how Bitcoin works and what it is, but there isn't this kind of opinion ideas that's out there. So that's going to be called the Crypto Note. Hopefully, if it's successful, we might put it as part of WCN, so you can have some international French content in there. It's an experiment that we're going to try out to see if if it's worth our time, because having a French audience is a little bit hard compared to the huge English market. So if you're a follower of WCN and you speak French and you want the same kind of content in French, start right now by going at Cryptonaut on Twitter and following us so you can see our first video, which is going to be hopefully next Sunday.
Bitcoin in French, people. You heard it right here. Francis is going to be doing that podcast. Awesome. I mean, we just need to get, we need podcasts from everybody here. John, you need to do more podcasts. Dan, you need to do more podcasts. Will, you need to do more. Everybody needs more podcasts because everybody here has been in the game for such a long time and has such important information to provide, I believe, and just, just great perspectives that I really appreciate all your guys' information. I really appreciate you guys, of course, coming on the show. Will, where can we find out more about you?
Yeah, all that stuff sounds so exciting, Francis. Wow, you really should have brought up the rear of the show, I think. But I'm super interested to get that content on the mining, electricity usage, Bitcoin electricity, all those statistics, and the disruption of HVAC industry, all of that. I would love to learn more about that. So yeah, everybody check that out, and I'm going to reach out to you, Francis, to find out exactly how soon I can learn about that stuff myself. But if anyone wants to keep in touch with me, just follow me on Twitter at Wilwaukee on Twitter, just like Milwaukee, but with my first name, Will. So yeah, follow me on Twitter. And thanks for having me, Vortex.
You bet, man. Yeah, we will at the WCN be syndicating more and more shows, especially if people like these guys start making some more shows. So definitely appreciate it, guys. We'll have more content for you, and follow these guys below. Of course, they're in the show notes. We always try to bring you more and more people on the Bitcoin News Show and on the World Crypto Network, more opinions, more advice, and more information. So thanks again, guys, for joining us. We'll of course be back here next Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific. So until then, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.